Hello everybody, I am El Bristow and you're watching Ellitopia Gaming, and today we are taking a look at the KerbalEDU mod from Teacher Gaming for Kerbal Space Program version 0.23. So the guys at Teacher Gaming, who brought us MinecraftEDU, have turned their hand to Kerbal Space Program, and they have brought us the KerbalEDU mod. The version that I'm looking at here is the 0.0.141. This is a very early alpha release of the mod, so I'm sure that many of the things that we look at in this review will probably change before the final release. However, I wanted to give you a quick review so that we could see what this mod was all about. Now, I don't normally do mod reviews, certainly not for Kerbal Space Program. However, this particular mod, KerbalEDU, kind of merges my two current interests, one of which is independent gaming, supporting independent gaming, which is obviously the aim of the Ellitopia Gaming channel, but also it brings in an educational element which ties in nicely with the work that I do over at edublogs.org. So I thought that I would make an exception and do a review of this mod. So let's head into the vehicle assembly building and we will take a look at what this mod has to offer. Okay, so here we are in the vehicle assembly building, and the first thing that you will obviously notice is the KerbalEDU panel that has appeared up on the right hand side here. We can hide and show this as we wish. The idea of this panel is to guide you through the construction of your rocket and to point out anything that you may have missed. So what we are going to do is put together a basic rocket and see what this panel recommends that we do. So we're going to start with a Mark 1-2 command pod, and this immediately says first stage thrust is 0. Well, yes, we've attached no rockets, no fuel tanks, so the thrust is 0. We are told there is crew but no parachute. Will they be safe? So we better add a parachute. So we'll add that one there. And there we go, that's gone now. No launch stability enhancers and no attitude control system. That we will come back to in a moment. Importantly though, first stage thrust is 0. So we are going to first of all add a stack decoupler, because we like to do that so that our people can detach from the fuel tanks. We then have some fuel to add on, so we'll add one of these guys and we will add a mainsail engine, which is overkill for a rocket like this, but there we go, we now have thrust. So stage 0, or our first stage, now does have thrust. We are going to add the attitude control that it is suggesting by adding an advanced SAS module, which is our reaction wheels. This does have some built-in reaction wheels, but this just boosts their strength. And it's saying no launch stability controllers, so we are going to add some launch stability enhancers. 2 of those, one either side. There we go. So we have a basic rocket, and all our warnings have disappeared. Now this panel also gives us a resource flow analysis. If we hit that, we see these little equal signs that pop up here, and this will tell us what is going to be using our resources. So for example, if we head down here, we can see that the mainsail engine provides 12 electrical charge and uses 48.21 liquid fuel and 58.93 oxidizer. If we have a look in the tank, it shows us how much liquid fuel and oxidizer this tank can hold. If we have a look at the reaction wheel, it shows that it uses 0.3 electric charge, and our command pod uses 1.2 electric charge whilst also storing 150, and it stores 30 monopropellant. So that's very handy for particularly complex builds. Will help you to work out what is using all of your charge. The launch stabilizers apparently provide electric charge. I'm not quite sure why that would be the case, but there we go. So that's the resource flow analysis, and it says here yellow shows consumption, green is production, and cyan is storage. Another very handy use for this KerbalEDU panel is the Info tab, and this will give you very useful information about your rocket. For example, you can open up the stages, and for each of the stages of your rocket, so let's for example use stage 2, which is the first stage that is going to fire, we are told at this stage what the mass of this stage and the total mass of our rocket is, what the dry mass of our stage is and the dry mass of our total rocket. We're told the weight and total weight in kilonewtons. We're told the thrust in kilonewtons, and very important statistic, our thrust to weight ratio. Our ISP is to do with the efficiency of the engine as it burns. Another important statistic is our delta V and our total delta V. These are very handy for planning long distance maneuvers and all sorts, and this is information that you would not normally be able to get out of the game without a mod. We're also told about the liquid fuel usage, the oxidizer usage, electric charge and cost, which hasn't yet been implemented fully into the game, but we are hoping that that will come with the 0.24 release of Kerbal Space Program. We can also get more of a breakdown of the individual parts. We can break this down really into fine detail, so there's a lot of detail that you can get from this panel, and you can do that for each stage. So stage 1 is an empty stage because it is literally just the stack decoupler. Stage 0 is our top stage with our command pod on, so for example this has 0 thrust and a 0 thrust to weight ratio. We can also do the same for the entire vehicle, which is very handy. Now we also have here the custom info tab, which starts off empty, and the idea of this is for you to customize what information you want to show, because for example all this information, there's a lot of information here, so you're probably not going to need it all. What we might be interested in, for example, is our thrust to weight ratio, perhaps our ISP and maybe our delta V of our entire vehicle, and that will now appear on our custom info tab. So this is very handy to quick reference some of the important numbers that you might need throughout the process of your flight. So we're going to give this a name, and we're going to call this the KerbalEDU 1. Let's test the KerbalEDU mod. But before we send this out to the launch pad, there is one more thing that we can add. We have the EDU force indicator, and what we can do is attach that somewhere on our rocket. We only want one of these. Whoops. There we go, and we're going to add it to there. And you will see in a moment what this does. This adds, the device measures all forces currently acting upon a vessel and shows them outside as nifty holographic arrows. So when we head out to the launch pad, you'll be able to see these, and that is what we are going to do now. Let's hide our KerbalEDU window and head out to the launch pad. Okay, so here we are out on the launch pad, and immediately you will notice, it's quite hard to miss, the flight recorder. This is also added by the KerbalEDU mod. Now this will record all the figures and the facts of your flight throughout your entire flight, and give it to you in graphic format, and it will even let you export it to a spreadsheet, which can be very handy for teachers in a class, which is obviously where this mod is targeted. You can change the record interval, which tells you when it is going to take snapshots of the figures. So if you're doing a quick flight, you might want 1 second intervals. If you're doing a long flight, you might not be interested in the detail, so you might want 10-second intervals, but you can set this as you like. The default is 5, and for now we are going to leave that at 5. And this will record all the information of our mission. You will also notice these holographic projections, as we mentioned, which are provided by our EDU indicator. And this is telling us that we have the force of gravity and ground force counteracting the force of gravity. Gravity is currently 463 kilonewtons of force on our rocket, and the ground is obviously counteracting that because we are not falling into the ground. These arrows are color coded and they have various different meanings. According to the information given to me by Teacher Gaming when they gave me this copy of KerbalEDU, the arrows on the flight recorder are color coded thusly. The yellow arrow represents gravity. The purple arrow, which we can't see at the moment, represents thrust, so we will see that soon enough. The cyan arrow, which again we can't see at the moment, represents aerodynamic forces, which is a combination of lift and drag. The green arrow, which we can see, is combined aerodynamics and ground, so support and friction forces when on the launch pad or accelerating down a runway or landed somewhere. As we are currently on the launch pad, we can see the green arrow. I'm pretty sure that as we take off, that green arrow will very quickly disappear from us. So we're going to have a look at how these arrows change throughout our flight, and we're going to see what the flight recorder does for us. What we are going to do is, as we would do with every launch, we are going to turn on our SAS, which is our launch stabilizer, which will turn on our reaction wheels and help us stay straight. We are going to put our throttle up to 100%, and we are going to check that our crew are all happy. Jebediah, Bill and Bob down here in the right hand corner, well, they don't look particularly happy, but they don't look particularly scared either, so I think we are good to go. We are ready for launch in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff, and instantly we can see we have a thrust of 1,500 kilonewtons that way. Gravity is having an ever decreasing effect on us as we get further and further away from the celestial body, i.e. the planet. And aerodynamics have a force on us at the moment, but again they are decreasing, well, they're currently increasing as we are speeding up, but as we get out of the atmosphere they will decrease. There we go, as the atmosphere gets thinner. We can see that the flight recorder is recording lots and lots of different colours of information. We will come back and have a look at what all that information means in just a moment. For now, we're going to reduce our thrust so that we only have roughly 2 Gs of acceleration, and we're going to keep that down, and we're going to start heading left for a gravity turn to see if we can create an orbit, and we're going to keep an eye on our thrust as we do that too. There we go, we're now at 45 degrees and we can bring our thrust right down. We probably won't get this into orbit because we haven't got a lot of fuel with us, but our speed is increasing, our acceleration is continually increasing above 2 Gs. And if we jump to the map, we will see that our apoapsis is, it's above 70,000 meters, 70 kilometers, so we can cut our engines. This planet of Kerbal, unlike Earth, has an atmosphere of only 70 kilometers. The atmosphere on Earth is at 100 kilometers, there or thereabouts. So once we get outside of 70 kilometers, aerodynamics no longer play a part. I've cut our engines so you can see that the only force on us at the moment is gravity. We have no thrust and no aerodynamic effects at the moment. We are literally drifting based on our momentum. We are heading into orbit. I'm going to point us towards the horizon so that when we get outside the atmosphere we can start to burn and use up the rest of our fuel to see how far we can get this rocket. So we are at 66,000 meters, 66 kilometers. The atmosphere is at 70 kilometers, so once we get outside 70 kilometers I will start the burn, which is right about now. And we can see those arrows appear again. Our acceleration g-force shoots up. And we've run out of fuel. So there we go. We should have brought more fuel with us. However, there we go. We're going to reach a 77,000 meter apoapsis, the highest point on our orbit, and we're travelling quite a long distance on this launch. However, we no longer need this fuel, so we can stage off our fuel, and there we go. We are free to return to the planet. We're going to turn off our SAS because we don't really need that now, and we're going to set ourselves up ready to return to the planet. We are also going to prep our parachute so that when we get to the appropriate point in our descent, we will be ready to deploy that parachute. So I'm going to jump us forward now until our descent, and you can see what happens there. Okay, so we have re-entered the atmosphere. We are coming now down to 35 kilometers. We can see now gravity has a 39 kilonewtons of force on us, and aerodynamics are now starting to play a part at 28, 29, an increasing part as we enter the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is getting thicker, and we can now see some aerodynamic burning on our re-entry. Our parachute has deployed to help slow us down, not fully deployed. It won't fully deploy until we get down to about 500 meters, but you can see that the aerodynamics now are getting us to slow down, and the aerodynamics have done their job, and our speed is dropping, and so are the forces of aerodynamics as we slow down. So we are now kind of at a gentle descent towards the planet. These guys are not looking quite as happy as they were before. Jebediah's quite happy, but he's a rock. He's the Chuck Norris of Kerbals. So, but Bill and Bob are not quite so brave. So we are just coming under 1,000 meters, and as we hit 500, you will see our parachute has fully deployed to slow us down to a meager 8 meters per second. And if we have a look at our indication arrows, we will see that aerodynamics has pretty much counteracted the forces of gravity on us, and that is because obviously this parachute is using the atmosphere to slow us down. So we are going to now splash down into the ocean, and then we can take a look at our flight recorder. So our pod is now splashed down, so let's bring our flight recorder back to full view, and we will have a look at what this has to say. We have a brief summary here of what happened when during our flight. We had our liftoff at 000. At 2 minutes 58 we had the separation of stage 2. 6 minutes 48 our mainsail engine and our decoupler and our SAS module and our fuel tank splashed down and were destroyed because we decoupled them in orbit. So that's a summary of what happened during our flight, but here we have all this graphic information, which is obviously quite overwhelming at first. However, we can turn off all of these colours, and then we will have a look at them one by one. So here we go. The red line is our surface speed, our speed relative to the surface of the planet. And you can see that obviously that increases and increases and increases, and then probably roughly around here we ran out. We started to slow down our engines, so we started to lose some speed, and then here was where we did our burn above the atmosphere to speed us back up, and then this will probably be where we decoupled. There we go, separation of stage 2 confirmed was here, so this will probably be us re-entering the atmosphere, and then our parachute and the atmosphere slowing us down as we re-enter, and then obviously now our speed is 0. We then can compare that to our orbital speed, which on a flight like this is not too different because we didn't actually technically get into orbit. So on a flight like this they're pretty much the same. However, when you're starting to do proper orbital maneuvers and flying to different planets, you will notice that the orbital speed obviously will vary quite differently from our surface speed. The next line is the yellow line, which is our altitude, and you will see obviously we launched, our altitude increased, and then it slowed, and then we reached a peak, and then we started to come back down again, and then we hit down. So that's our altitude line. We have also an orbit altitude. I'm not 100% sure on what this is, but if there are any rocket science guys out there, I'm sure that you will know what the orbital altitude is in comparison to your standard altitude. I believe perhaps that this is our altitude relative to the center of the planet as opposed to our altitude relative to sea level above the planet, but I can't be too sure, so don't quote me on that. We then have our mass, which is the total mass of our rocket. Obviously it starts off large, which was a 46,981 kilogram behemoth. As we burnt our fuel during our launch, obviously our mass reduced as the weight of our fuel was burnt away. And then roughly around here, as we separated off stage 2, our mass reduced significantly because all we had left was our command pod, and then it stayed the same right the way to the end of our flight. Now for the physics teachers watching this video, we have our potential energy, kinetic energy, orbital potential energy, and orbital kinetic energy. So for any of you that are teaching physics, you can use these figures, these graphs, to show the difference between kinetic energy and how kinetic energy is used throughout the flight, and how that could affect perhaps your altitude or your thrust or your, I don't know, whatever. I don't know how you might want to use that information, but it's very useful information indeed. We also have our G-force, which shows the G-force is obviously on the people in our pod throughout the flight as that wobbles up and down. It started off very high, then dipped, and then came back up again as we came out of the atmosphere, then dipped again as we reduced our power, and then it kind of leveled out a bit, and then it dropped right off when we ran out of fuel, and then peaked again as we were coming back down into the atmosphere, and then stayed pretty much the same at 1 G, which would be just normal gravity. We also have internal energy, which I believe represents how much energy is stored by the fuel and the various different parts of our craft. So again, physics teachers could use these graphs to compare perhaps the internal energy to the potential energy, something along those lines. Again, very useful figures to have. You can export this information. What you do is you get it to the point where you want to export, so you can probably drag this out if you want a longer graph perhaps. So there we go, this would be our launch stage up until roughly the point where we ran out of fuel, and we can hit the export button to export this as a PNG file or a CSV file, or both. PNG being an image of this graph and the CSV file being the actual numbers in spreadsheet format. You can give your report a name, and when you hit save now, it will save it to the Kerbal Space Program directory under the Flight Reports subfolder. So you can do that, and then you can use this information to perhaps analyze the data, compare data between different flights. All very interesting and useful stuff. So that gives us a brief rundown of what the KerbalEDU mod can do and the information that it can provide. As I mentioned, this is still in the very early alpha stages. This is version 0.0.141. I'm sure these guys have a lot of plans for future additions to this mod, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens to this mod. Thank you for watching this video. Links will be in the description as to where you can download a copy of this mod and where you can find out more information about the guys at Teacher Gaming and the other projects that they are involved in. I have been El Bristow. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe on this video to let me know what you think and how you think perhaps this mod could be useful to your school. I've been El Bristow, you are watching the Ellitopia gaming channel. Thank you for watching and I will see you next time. See you later guys!